Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Ever since the Muslim Brotherhood was toppled in Cairo by General-turned-President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Turkey's ruler Recep Tayyip Erdogan has evidently cooled his country's relations with Egypt to the extent that put the two nations on a course of bitter rivalry for supremacy among Muslim nations in the Eastern Mediterranean. Are those two regional powers on a collision course? To tackle this question, we're joined here in the studio by Professor Eytan Cohen, who is the president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Welcome. I'd like also to welcome our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren, and Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, who is a research fellow at the Moshe Dayan Center, as well as the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security at Tel Aviv University.
Thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Oren, give us a broader understanding of the current dynamic between those two regional powers.
Turkey and Egypt have some common denominators. For one, they are probably the only two countries to straddle two continents, Turkey being in Europe and Asia, and Egypt in Africa and Asia, because Sinai is in Asia. Also, of course, they used to be leading powers in the region and have fallen from grace. Erdogan has been trying to restore Turkey's glorious days, not with a great success, but he has ambitions about it. Sisi, on the other hand, does not try to do a Nasser, to be a pan-Arabic, pan-Islamic, and pan-African leader. But he does see his role as leading Egypt out of its various crises, the economic one, the security one. And one more thing they have in common is that Libya is to Egypt what Syria is to Turkey. That is a neighbor with a very precarious security position, and out of which there are risks to Turkey in the Syrian case and to Egypt in the Libyan case. And it is in Libya where they are on a collision course, because Turkey decided to help one of the two rivals there, Sarraj, while Egypt, as well as Russia and others, Israel too, in a way, Egypt supports his rival, the self-appointed Field Marshal Haftar. And because it is in Egypt's national security interest to have a stable Libya, while for Turkey it is more of a place where it can raise hell, it can try to show that it has interests in the Mediterranean as an economic zone, and not only in the landmass of Europe or of Asia, unless there is more and stronger mediation between the rival groups in Libya, the Benghazi group and the Tripoli group, if you want to put it this way. We may see an armed clash between Turkish and Egyptian forces in Libya.
Indeed. Professor Winbal, to what degree do you think that the current situation is truly severe when we're talking about a possibility of a frontal collusion between those two countries? Also keeping in mind, of course, that the AKP party of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan supports openly the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the organization that not only was the one that was toppled by the current presiding leadership in Egypt, but also of some of its bitter enemies in the region, including, of course, the bordering Islamist Hamas organization, and Sarraj, who also has strong ties with the Muslim Brotherhood and receives, as such, also the backing from Ankara.
First of all, I would like to point out that there are additional points of friction between Turkey and Egypt. It is Gaza. Hamas is supported by Turkey, while the Egyptians try to constrain the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's also Sudan, where the Turks try to build a naval base, and we see competition there as well. In final analysis, I would hesitate to forecast a military confrontation between those two great powers. I think the Turks are at disadvantage. They are further away from the Libyan arena. And both actually use proxies. They are not sending their own troops, which makes the situation more bearable.
That's an important point indeed, Dr. Cohen Yanarocak, when we're talking about proxies being employed also now in the Libyan arena between Egypt and Turkey. We see now the Free Syrian Army, if you will, that was used by the Turks also in the various operations, cross-border operations in Yarablus and elsewhere in Syria. Now a significant portion of those troops have been shipped out to Libya and are there to support the Turkish policies. Of course, Sarraj is the Turkish policy executor, or however you would like to call it. To what degree do you see this exacerbating to a certain degree, where other countries in the region will also start siding with one country or another, as we see also France, of course, now coming into the agreement with with Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. Italy is, of course, also a big part of it, a country that has big stakes in Libya, historically speaking, and also today. And not to forget that Italy is also a big part of the situation in Libya, and that the reformer of Turkey, Ataturk, was that famous general who was able to defeat the Italian invasion in the past, which put him on the map politically also in Turkey, that led to the Turkey of today, or at least until 2099, when President Erdogan started assuming his roles in power.
Well, the Turkish foreign policy is designed with a doctrine called the precious loneliness. And when we are looking at the Eastern Mediterranean, we see that Turkey is really lonely. Look at the map. We see that Turkey has no proper relations with Haftar, then with Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. They have no proper relations with us. They don't have proper relations with Bashar al-Assad, no. With the Cypriots, no. With the Greeks, no. Only with Hamas, and if you consider Qatar is a regional state, only with Qatar they have proper relations. So they want to put an end to this precious loneliness by making new alliances, like this Sarraj government is a good example of it. But the real reason for forging this alliance is, we can say, that is to break the geographical contiguity between the Republic of Cyprus's exclusive economic zone with the Greek economic zone, exclusive economic zone. So this is a calculation that basically came and expanded in the area of Northern Africa. And in order to strengthen its position, Turkey nowadays is also trying to persuade the Algerians, the Tunisians, and also President Erdogan will pay a visit to Gambia. And in this regard, when we are looking at this whole picture, we can see that Turkey is trying to be very much present, but let us not forget the real reason of the Turkish presence in Libya. It's because of the Eastern Mediterranean, and in order to preserve the immediate Turkish interests, as well as their affinity to the Muslim Brotherhood movement. And you also mentioned about the proxies. The presence of the Turkish proxies in Libya is not a new thing. They are present there since 2013. There is a company called Sadat. This is a sort of a Wagner. In Russia we have Wagner, that they're also operating in Libya. So we have the Turkish Wagner called Sadat. This company is ran by a senior advisor of Mr. Erdogan. His name is Adnan Tanrıverdi, and they are there. They are also sending these mercenaries, the mercenaries of the Free Syrian Army, to Libya. And it's not a secret that this company, Sadat, is providing military equipment and military trainings and everything that these mercenaries need. And they're doing the dirty job for Turkey. And at the end of the day, you will not see any casualty of the Turkish armed forces. And that's what Erdogan needs. He wants to fight without the Turkish soldiers' coffins.
Indeed.
These are mercenaries, and in Egypt he wanted to have mercenaries after Mohammed Morsi.
But this is an important point, however, with all the jokes aside. Mr. Oren, at the height of the Arab Spring, if we can call it that still, we could see one country after another adopting a certain Muslim Brotherhood or affiliated spirit, and it seemed like the Muslim Brotherhood was gaining ground throughout the Middle East. And of course, the fact that Egypt fell into the hands through a somewhat democratic election, it was pretty much predictable that Turkey is going to gain ground throughout the region, and some said that here this is now the laying of the ground for the Ottoman Empire to return to a certain reality, if you will. But now we're a few years later, and it seems like, as Dr. Cohen Yanarocak states, Turkey is lonely. It doesn't seem to find its place in this region. The only ones it's talking to is Qatar, which is also a big backer of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Islamic Republic of Iran, because it's also a lone wolf right now, trying to maneuver its way with the help of other Shiite organizations. To what degree can Turkey now face Egypt, which seems to be more well organized and not only having the backing of the United States because of the gas pipeline, but also of Israel, also the support of Russia from all players? How can it maneuver here?
Well, history is cruel. Here we are sitting in Jerusalem, where the Ottomans ruled for 400 years. What do they have to show for it, except for Sultan Suleiman Street and the wall around the old city? There is nothing left of the
Turkish coffee.
Turkish coffee, which was brought
Some may say Greek coffee these
to
days.
Vienna first, yes, of course. So it is Erdogan personally, because if you go back to the 1990s, right after the Oslo process and Israel's peace with Jordan, we had a new axis. Not all of it was above ground. Israel, Jordan, Turkey. This was a strategic alliance between pro-Western states in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, Jordan, of course, was also a member or at least affiliated with the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. And now people are looking at a so-called Arab quartet: Egypt, Jordan, the two countries having peace with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates. These are supposedly the four moderates. And had Erdogan not come to power, what would have happened as an extension of the Oslo process and what NATO called the Mediterranean Dialogue, which they started in the 1990s, was to have Israel, Jordan, Egypt, and the three North African countries, Morocco, Tunisia, and Mauritania, not Algeria, probably combined with some semi-peaceful relations. Turkey became the spoiler. It resisted Israeli operations and exercises in NATO, and Erdogan, because he was blocked when he tried to join the European Union, started taking revenge and having some independent policies. So it all, you mentioned the AK party, the only ruler they had up to now, in various guises, either prime minister or president, was Erdogan. He's the Turkish Putin. Putin, too, was once prime minister, then president. If they have someone else, it may all change.
Professor Inbar, how do you perceive this?
Well, first of all, I would like to point out that the Turkish interest in Libya is connected also to two other issues. First of all is, of course, energy. And they delineated economic zone which borders this of Libya, which to some extent blocks or is supposed to block the ability of Israel and Egypt to build a pipeline to Europe. And they want to be the hub of energy that goes to Europe. And the second issue, I think people don't realize it's immigration to Europe. Libya is the gate of Africa to Europe. And we shouldn't forget that Erdogan has plenty of refugees in his countries that he threatens with them Europe. So he may have, if he will control Libya, he may have another way to threaten the Europeans to get what he wants from them. So I think the Turkish behavior in Libya is strategic. It gives it serious thought. About loneliness. I know Turkey for a while. They don't care. They are big. They were an empire. I don't think that they really feel lonely.
Culturally speaking, they're still an empire to a certain degree.
Yes, and they are, a country of, a big country. Yeah. They don't think of themselves of really being lonely. They don't need friends. They are the friends that others want them to be. So, it's a different, psychology.
They are isolating the rest of the world.
Right.
Dr. Cohen Yanarocak, how do you view this statement?
Well, from my perspective, please apologies, you're my professor, but I do not agree with you in this matter.
It's fine.
We
are
throughout,
democratic country.
Throughout the history, the Turks wanted to have a balanced foreign policy. Whenever they were strengthening their relations with the West, so it was not only at the expense of the Russians. They also tried to preserve good relations with the Russians. And let us not forget, today maybe because of this bromance between Erdogan and Putin that we have proper relationship between Russia and Turkey, but Russia is Turkey's historical nemesis.
Nevertheless, and correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Inbar, what he alluded to, which I do see a point there, is that Turkey always was viewed and perceived as the gateway from west to east.
It is still.
And if it still maintains that position, its foreign policy needs to be derived out of strength and not out of weakness.
First of all, they will never be able to lose this advantage because of their geographical position.
So bolstering that advantage will give it also leverage on foreign policy of other nations towards it.
They are getting all the pipelines. They are functioning as a bridge between the East and the West. Let's say today I would like to fly to Russia or to Beijing. How am I going to fly from Ben Gurion Airport? I first of all have to fly and pass via Turkey. Turkey is also Israel's, vessels, to the east.
Unless you fly India Air and then you go through Saudi Arabia.
That's another issue. Yeah,
that's another. Flying,
yeah.
Oh. Okay.
and in this matter, I think that it would be not good to think that Turkey is only going to the Russian side or to the Western side. No, they always try to balance. And when they are approaching to the Russians, they will never forget that Russians were their historical enemy. They were, if I'm not mistaken, they were defeated 14 times in the war theater, in various war theaters throughout the history. So they know that they cannot really trust the Russians. And we should also not forget the 24th of November 2015, the Teachers' Day in Turkey, when Turkey basically what they did, they shot a Russian jet. So I don't think that Mr. Putin can forget that easily. And after that, we also have witnessed that a Russian ambassador was killed live, by a Turkish policeman. Mm-hmm. Later, we understood that he was a terrorist, right? So I sincerely don't think that Turks can trust the Russians, and they may crown the Russians as their new allies. No.
But it's to
They have to balance.
But it's to the Turks' credit that after their 13th defeat, they still tried once more.
Mr. Oren, to what degree do you see Israel embroiled in this situation, considering the fact that Egypt is its neighbor on one end, and Turkey is not far to the north from Israel, with the battleground, if there is one to be fought, actually being in the Mediterranean, just off the coast of Israel, an area, of course, of large, vast economic value for Israel, and of course the fact that there are other actors that Israel has an interest with, also potentially participating in this situation.
Well, we have seen a dramatic shift in Israel's relations with Ankara and Cairo throughout the years. As long as Egypt was Israel's most threatening Arab neighbor, with the biggest army and with Nasser as the leader of the Arab world, Turkey was Israel's not closest, but closet ally. And when Syria joined Egypt in the United Arab Republic in the late 1950s, Israel and Turkey had joint invasion plans against Syria, Israel coming in from the south, Turkey from the north. This all changed, and now Egypt is Israel's ally in the fight against terrorism and in many other respects, and in being pro-American or part of the American scheme in the region, while Turkey is no longer allied with Israel. And if Israel had to choose now, of course, it would go with Egypt. One more feature of the relationship between Israel and Turkey was that as long as Israel had very powerful friends on Capitol Hill in Congress, it used to help Turkey try to block pro-Greek measures.
Also pro-Armenian.
Pro-Armenian, but there were very few Armenian members of Congress. There were powerful people in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, as well as governors, presidential candidates, and Israel was Turkey's secret emissary to the administrations and to Congress, so that when Turkey invaded North Cyprus in 1974, Israel helped block the extreme measures which Washington was about to put on Turkey. Of course, now Israel is allied with Cyprus, with the Greek part of Cyprus, to such an extent that Israel's commando brigade, which is going to act in whatever scenario, be it in Syria or Iran, trains in Cyprus. Mm-hmm. It tries to find similar terrain.
And Israeli Air Force trains in Greece.
Right. Oh. And the reason they do it is that both the army and the Air Force know every part of Israel. They cannot surprise themselves in any training. So they go to some new territory, such as in Cyprus and Greece.
We don't have very much time left, but I'd like to ask you, Professor Inbal, because this is very important also for our viewers to understand. Israel has significant economic interests in both Egypt and Turkey. Even though all the rhetoric from Turkey continues to float towards Israel, it seems like the economic trajectory keeps going up. And also don't forget the fact that Israel signed a massive deal on the gas issue with Egypt, which embroiled its investment shares in both countries.
Well, I think there is a certain pragmatic streak in Erdogan's behavior, not affecting economic Israeli-Turkish relations. He takes care of his business communities that supports him. But having said that, his behavior is less tolerated in Israel. And for the first time in Israel's history, the Israeli intelligence has decided to place Turkey on the enemy threat, being a threat to Israel, which is significant. Mm-hmm. And I think Israel, despite seeing Turkey as a threat, is very careful not to allow any incidents escalate in air or on the sea. And this is something that Israel will try to prevent, to have a military confrontation with such a power as Turkey.
Indeed. So drawing near to the end of the program, your projection for the near future, are we heading to more of a confrontation, or is this too early to identify the patterns going forward?
We cannot ignore the personality of Erdogan that might escalate things, but unless such an extreme thing happens, it will be more of the usual.
Dr. Cohen Yanarocak?
Erdogan will continue to delegitimize Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's government, but also, as we see in the Israeli case, the Turkish-Egyptian economic relations are also prosperous, very prosperous. Turkey is the number one country when it comes to the whole Africa region as the exporter. So we're going to see if there will be an escalation. I think it will come from the Egyptian side, if the Egyptians will try to cancel free trade agreements in order to to deteriorate Turkey's economic status in the continent. So I think the ball is in the Egyptian court and not in the Turkish one.
Mr. Oren?
Turkey is indeed an adversary to Israel, not an enemy, but it is a threat, a peripheral one. Israel's main interest lies in the confrontation state and in the Palestinians, and secondly, with the so-called third circle, namely Iran. But Turkey is also a country of interest, and indirectly there could be some confrontation.
And when we're looking on the power balance between those two countries, we can't really compare between Egypt and Turkey. Turkey is significantly more advanced, isn't it?
Yes, but the question, of course, is whether any country has an offensive policy or only wants to safeguard its interests. Egypt does not have any expansionist policy now.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today, so I'd like to thank Professor Inbar, Mr. Oren, and Dr. Cohen Yanarocak, and I'd like to thank our viewers as well, and we will see you next time.
You just watched TV7 Jerusalem Studio. We encourage you to pray for the challenges raised in today's program. If you were blessed by our production, please consider supporting TV7 Israel. The details of our respective bank accounts for donations from Europe and the United States appear on the screen. Your generosity allows us to continue to serve God's calling, to broadcast content that truly matters through TV7 Israel from Jerusalem.